We generally operate under a straightforward set of rules when it comes to early parenting. You feed them on time, you hold them when they cry, and put them down to sleep. If those boxes are checked, the assumption is that your baby is perfectly secure. But biological research reveals a much more sensitive reality. Infants as young as 6 months act as highly calibrated emotional barometers. They can detect unspoken tension in a room, even when nobody is raising their voice. This diagram illustrates an infant's physiological response to that invisible tension. We see a stable baseline nervous system suddenly spike into a heightened stress state, driven by elevated cortisol levels. They are physically reacting to an environment they cannot yet verbalize. This points to a modern paradox. It is entirely possible to be physically sitting right next to your child on the floor, yet completely absorbed by a screen or mental fatigue. Psychologists call this emotional absence. You are in the room, but your facial expression is flat and unresponsive to their bids for attention. Because babies lack spoken language, they rely almost entirely on reading faces to understand their environment. That reliance makes them uniquely vulnerable to these everyday moments of distracted disconnection. Consider how often a baby looks up to engage, waiting for a smile or a sound, only to find their caregiver's eyes locked onto a smartphone. Researcher Dr. Ed Tronick spent decades studying exactly this dynamic, establishing a clinical baseline known as the still face effect. When a parent presents an emotionally blank face, the baby's reaction follows a predictable sequence. First, they try to pull the adult back in by smiling, pointing, or making sounds. When nothing comes back, they rapidly show visible signs of distress and shut down. This logic flowchart maps out exactly what happens in the infant's brain. An infant cannot comprehend the concept of an adult being busy. When the visual input is a blank face, the brain bypasses logical processing and routes that input directly into a danger signal. To feel secure, an infant requires active mirroring. A caregiver needs to match their energetic state, returning a smile or offering a soft, concerned look when they cry to validate that they are seen. When emotional absence and flat responses become chronic, it physically restructures the baby's developing nervous system, shifting their baseline into a state of continuous stress. That stress response is also triggered by sensory overload. Often, the well-meaning parental instinct to continually entertain or stimulate a fussing baby actually pushes their nervous system past its limit. When a baby reaches sensory overload, they employ a biological self-regulation tool called gaze aversion. Looking away is a deliberate physical strategy to limit input and reset. Studies conducted at the University of Cambridge show that interrupting this process by forcing eye contact or physical interaction actively spikes the child's stress levels. If a baby arches their back or turns away, and a caregiver overrides those physical boundaries to force engagement, it communicates to the infant that their bodily signals carry no weight. This pattern of invalidation frequently extends into the toddler years through emotional dismissal. A classic example is an adult treating a child's meltdown over a slightly wrong cup color as overdramatic or silly. By consistently mocking or minimizing these intense reactions, adults inadvertently train the child to distrust and disconnect from their own internal emotional reality. The broader atmosphere of a home plays an equally vital role in an infant's feeling of safety. An adult argument taking place entirely in another room still impacts a baby sitting quietly nearby. Research from UC Berkeley points to an innate survival mechanism known as emotional contagion, where infants automatically absorb the ambient stress of adults around them. This need for environmental predictability is often broken by another common habit, the silent goodbye. Many caregivers quietly sneak out of a room while the child is distracted to avoid a brief crying fit. Data from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child indicates that unexpected disappearances trigger massive spikes in infant anxiety. A clean, vocalized transition allows the brain to process the separation safely. This specific need for a predictable world forms the basis of Dr. Mary Ainsworth's foundational research on attachment, establishing the importance of responding to an infant's cries promptly and consistently. Ignoring those cries or sneaking out of a room does not teach a baby patience. It teaches their developing brain that the world is unpredictable, laying down the physiological groundwork for an anxious attachment style. Maintaining perfect, uninterrupted emotional attunement with a child is a biological impossibility. Missteps, distractions, and rough days are inevitable. A landmark study led by Dr. Beatrice Beebe at Columbia University tracked early mother-infant interactions to observe how these inevitable missteps play out over time. The core finding was highly specific. A child's long-term emotional health is not predicted by a lack of disconnections. It is predicted by the quality of the parent's return. This specific action is known as repair. It means putting down the phone, offering warm eye contact, and validating small upsets to clearly signal that safety has been restored. This graph models the process. A steady emotional baseline tracks until a moment of disconnection causes a sharp dip, a psychological rupture. But successful repair expands psychological capacity. The line curves back up, extending past the original baseline, building a higher tier of emotional resilience. This points directly to the clinical standard of the good enough parent. Self-awareness and a willingness to reconnect hold far more value than a flawless performance. True, secure bonding does not happen in a vacuum free of mistakes. It is forged in the deliberate, loving moments of simply returning to connection.